Oh, I don't know why, but sometimes we just need escape. Now Jerry's got his boots on and he's dragging us out and far away. It's a fever.
Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora, kia ora. Welcome to another episode of Tararua Fever. Ki te whakarongo mai koe o te Tararua Fever, the podcast that is anything and everything to do with tramping in the Tararua Ranges. This is episode 11. Can you believe it? We've gotten this far. It's called The T-Files, Seeing is Believing. Called Jerry Tokawinga. I am your host, Jerry, the imposter expert that just loves to yarn about anything to do with tramping in the Tararua Ranges. Joining me today is my co-host, Kent. How are you, mate? How's your fever symptoms been going lately?
Kia ora, Jerry. Pretty well. Definitely been keen to get up in the hills, but there has been a lot of rain and a lot of wind.
Yeah.
Spring is here. So the Wakanai River's been up, so I think I'll leave it for a drier day.
Fair enough. And it's kind of classic in the spring that those nor'wester gales just come through and just make life a bit gnarly in there. It's a bit warmer, but it's just a bit more difficult as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and just a bit breezier for sure. But
Yeah.
our time will come.
Nice. Well, we've got quite a lot to cover off today, and the main theme of today is the T-Files, the Tararua Files. And it's going to be all about Ghosts of the Tararua Ranges. We'll get into that a bit more soon, but we've got a couple of housekeeping bits to tick off before we get into it. And one of the main headlines is that we released the first Scroggin episode a couple of weeks ago, and basically that's all filler no spiller. I'm calling it. It's basically filling the gaps because we know that there's normally a month between the main Tararua Fever episode, so it's giving everyone a little bit of a taste. The last proper episode of Tararua Fever featured yourself and our other mates. We went on a baby shower tramp for me. I was real humbled by all my good mates. But the update is, and it featured on Scroggin, is that Lex and I now have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Baby Johan.
Congratulations are in order. Very exciting.
Thank you.
How's it going?
If I would summarise it, people said it would be hard, but nothing could have actually prepared me for dad life. It's
been so validating for me hearing you say this and be like, yeah, it is really hard, eh?
you and I have had a daily voice note messages going between ourselves, and it's been real helpful hearing your experiences of being a dad and as I'm sort of experiencing it. So I've really enjoyed that. Thanks, man.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited for you both.
Thank you. I also want to announce that we're doing another giveaway quiz question. So for listeners who were interested in the last one, we're going to do the same again today. It's not going to be hut related, but it is going to be the same sort of concept where we'll give a question out there. People can send their answer in, and if they get it correct, it's not going to be too hard. Very Googleable if people want to make the effort. The one thing I will say is it's going to be based on the Ghosts of the Tararua Ranges.
Can I enter this quiz, or is that's a conflict of interest?
It might be a conflict of interest. Today's show is about Ghosts of the Tararua Ranges. We're going to get into that soon with our first interview. We're trying to get this podcast out. I mean, obviously, you and I are recording in advance, but kind of around the same time as Halloween. I have mixed views about Halloween, but having said that, I'm sure that my new baby, will be really into it later on in life, and I'll have to go trick-or-treating with him. So I'll have to deal with that for my sins.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask, have you and I ever had any weird, kind of unexplainable circumstances?
I thought about this, and I really wanted to say yeah, but I honestly don't have any memories of unexpected strangeness in the Tararuas.
Right.
Nah. Do you have any that come to mind?
I've got one, and I tell it in the upcoming interview, so I won't say it now.
Mm-hmm.
It's to do with Pau Hut.
Perfect.
Right. Up next is an interview with Mike Devon, so we'll see you back soon. Alrighty, I'm joined by a guest who I met a few years ago at Paraguay Hut, who just so happened to be a fascinating chat. We discussed a range of things about tramping in the Tararua Ranges, so much so that I thought, how could I not invite him onto the show? So joining me today is Mike Devon from Heritage New Zealand, amongst a whole bunch of other things. Kia ora e hoa. Welcome to Tararua Fever. How are you today?
All right, thank you for the invite. I feel honoured.
It's my pleasure. I did call you a few weeks ago, right out of the blue, and I wasn't even sure if you'd remember who I was at the time.
I vaguely remember that. It was night time, and I think I came in at night, didn't I?
I think you were actually about to leave at the time. So we got to Parawai Hut at, I don't know, it was a Friday night, maybe 5 o'clock-ish, and you were about to go night strolling.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Strolling is a nice way to put it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, from there we got into some, but you stayed about an hour longer than you needed to because we were just chatting for so long.
Yeah.
You mentioned a bunch of things. And one of the things that you mentioned as a part of your night stroll was that you're about to go check out one of your camps off-piste where you had, a whole lot of food stored and just checking out on things. And one of your frequent areas that you like to go.
Yeah. That particular night, I was going up towards Waiwai. Over the years, over 50 odd years, I've set up food caches around the Tararuas, food dumps. And this was one of them. From end to end, from side to side, there are food dumps. Some I haven't seen in 40 years. Others I've had to use in emergency. So that's where I was going that particular night. I call it Camp Saxon after my dog Saxon. We were in search and rescue. And he was a huge Malamute, 62 kg, massive dog. And he was 13 years in the Tararuas. But anyway...
well, Mike, I'm kind of going off what we spoke about last time when we actually met each other. And our conversation ended up straying into a really particularly odd area that some might consider. It was the topic of ghosts.
I can tell you some stories. I'll tell you the ones that the more not scary, but ones that stick out most from the others. A couple that stick out. One, I was on duty for 7 days, 1991, January, the busiest time in the Tararuas, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
When we were collecting money, I would take out for a long weekend $300. Back then, 30 years ago, it was a lot of money. And that's how busy it was there.
Yeah.
So I relieved the other hut warden on the Sunday. Saturday night he went out. And so I went from Sunday to Sunday. Believe it or not, from Sunday to Sunday, no one came into the hut. I couldn't believe it.
What
busy
hut were you in,
week.
Sorry?
Powell Hut. The
yeah.
second Powell Hut.
Okay.
Right. Been 2 since then.
Yep.
Right. I was in the second Powell Hut for a whole week. The only time I saw anyone was the following Saturday. That's 6 days. Well, a fella came in. He sat outside, had his lunch, and he went up to Holdsworth. He didn't even call in on the way back. Didn't even go into the hut. Now, so I'm there on the Sunday. On the Tuesday evening, as used to go into the old hut, there was a potbelly stove, and in front of that were the bunks. And I slept on 2 mattresses right opposite the fire. And it was 11 o'clock at night exactly, on the dot. Precisely. I was laying with my headphones in, with a transistor radio, and I was listening to the news on the national programme, and the time pips came on. And at the last pip, which is a long one, as I mentioned, this is 1991, and when the pips came on the very last pip, my mattress, now imagine trying to bend 2 of those vinyl mattresses with legs on it. Well, they both came up in the air, and then slammed down, came up again, and slammed down. And I shouted, "Who's there? What do you want? What do you want?" Nothing. Now, I was wide awake. I was listening, waiting for the news
Were the
and the
mattresses
weather.
almost like folding up or something?
Bent up, double. My feet, they come up and almost touch the top bunk above me.
Bloody hell.
The platform above me.
Okay.
I came right up at right angles almost.
Yep.
Lifted me up and slammed down, and then picked up again and slammed down. Just as an aside, this may have been the same spirit, I don't know. But in the November before that, a man and his 2 boys slept where I slept, opposite the potbelly stove. And at 10 to midnight, a man came in and warmed himself by the fire with his dog. And the man stood up and he said, I sat up and said, "G'day, where have you come in from?" And he disappeared. And the door was open. So I had to get up and shut the door. And then when on the bewitching hour at midnight, 10 minutes later, the door opened and slammed back against the bench. Now, I spoke to him about this, and I said, look, he said, I might not have closed the door properly. And I said, all the years I've been coming to this hut, it's never blown open when it's shut. They have what's called a schlag lock. It's a round handle. And they put the handle, the knob, too close to the door frame. So as you went to open the door, you always knocked your knuckles on the frame. And it was always difficult, especially if it was cold, it's winter. It was hard always to open. And so once it's shut, it's shut. It's not going to blow open. But he said that he reckoned he shut the door properly, but it blew open. Now, the other incident, which was quite, it was more personal than that one, and that was at Kime Hut. Now, I was invited by the Paraguay Lodge club to go for an overnighter with them. And the way they were going was up the Waitaru and via Tregear Spur, and then down to Kime Hut from there. Now, I was quite annoyed, actually. I found every hut in the Tararuas on my own, believe it or not. And one hut I've never been to by then was Kime. But anyway, we went up to Kime with that group. We came down into Kime Hut. There was quite a large group. And when you go into the old Kime Hut, the one before the one there now, you've got a drying room. And then as you go in, you've got bunks to the left, bunks to the right. I always used to take the left bunk, top one, right over in the corner. So if anyone had to get up in the night, they didn't have to crawl over you and didn't disturb you. Now, this incident, on my bunk, there were 2 other women further down. You could see them by, faint light, you see their shapes. And I was laying there, and this happened, again, between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. because I fell asleep with my little radio on, earphones in, and I heard the 2 o'clock pips on the national programme, and then I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I turned the radio on, and the 5 o'clock pips came on. All right? You always carry a little radio. It's comforting, when you're in the bush. Between that time, there was a young lady appeared alongside my sleeping bag. I just saw the silhouette. Shoulder length hair came down to her shoulder. I was laying on my side with my hand underneath me. She put her hand through the sleeping bag and touched my hand, and we circled thumbs. When you two thumbs like that, going round and round each other. It was soft. I remember her hand being soft, and I went to grab her. Now, some people said to me, you're in that stage of sleep where your brain's awake but your body's... I said, no, I've suffered that as a kid, not since. And I said, no. Anyway, I did eventually go to touch her, and she disappeared. Now, I did a lot of research over the years and about people being lost in the bush and so on. Now, the last big search up there by the dress circle was for a fellow called Jensen. And I think they searched for 10 days, 100-odd people searched for him in 1969, I think that was. That was the last big search up there. But you will not find on record of any woman being lost up there. Now, when I went to work, there was an old married woman called Marjorie, and I chatted to her about it. She said, probably a Maori tribe raiding another tribe, village. She's taken off, got lost in the bush, and ended up there. Okay. All right? That's what she might have thought. So she said, say a little prayer before you go in. Next time, say a little prayer. But anyway, there was a young girl there, Caroline, who's now not with us anymore, unfortunately. She liked the Tararuas, and she said, Mike, I've never been to Kime. I never told anyone about this, right? And she said, round morning tea in the tea room at work. And I mentioned I've been to Kime, and I said, well, what are you doing next week? So the following week, we went up there. I never told her about the incident. There's one other person in there. We laid where I laid that previous week, and she woke me up around about 3 o'clock and said, Mike, there's someone down there. And I said, no, it's the young fella. She said, no, you can hear him snoring. And there's a little kitchen, and not so much now, but people used to leave knives and forks. You still find it in a few huts. Doc clears them out occasionally. And there was a tin of knives and forks and stuff left behind. And you could hear it rattling. And I said, oh, it's the rats. But there were no rats in that hut. It was a pretty secure hut, that, because it was still new at the time. And anyway, then she woke me up round about 4 o'clock, an hour or two later. And she said, there is someone down there. And I could hear someone moving. And you could hear the other fella snoring. Anyway, I didn't say anything. In the morning, I told her what I'd experienced. And she thanked me for not telling her. Because she was terrified. And there was something, I don't know what it was. The other stories I could tell are only sort of messy. Like one, 1991, just opened the Waitawaiwai new hut, January, and I went into the hut. Now, I like tramping at night as well. I know the track so well. So anyway, I get to the plateau, across the plateau stream. Those who know the Tararua know what I'm talking about. And I get to the plateau, and then as I'm crossing I cross the plateau, and then you drop down Arapito track along the side of the stream there. And you get down, and there's quite a sharp right-angled turn. And I got there, and I was terrified. I'm not ashamed to say that. The hairs went up on the back of my neck, and I felt really scared. And this is after years of experience still, in the Tararuas. And I couldn't wait to get to the hut. So I got to the hut. I was glad to shut that door behind me. Now, in the November, the same year, I'm going in for about 4 or 5 days duty at the hut. And it's a nighttime tramp again, believe it or not. And I get to that same spot, and the hairs go up at the back of my neck again. And I moved it to the hut.
Is this inexplicably? You don't know why the hairs are going up on the...
No, that spot. And then, it wasn't until I got to the hut that I realised, I thought, this happened earlier on in the year as well to me. And it's never happened since. But then I haven't been down there in the dark since as well. Been down there a few times, quite a few times since. But not that time. But it was round about the same time. It's just amazing. I write a lot of poetry for the bush, and I give readings at the different clubs, all right, over the last 30-odd years. Did Tararua Tramping Club about 30 years ago, and I did them last year again. And there's all these fresh faces, and they wouldn't remember me from 30 years ago. Halfway through, to break it up, I stop, and I give about 10-minute talk on all the ghosts, the supernatural things I've experienced in the bush. Now, when it's all over and we have supper, cup of tea and the chat, the number of people who've come up to me, I'm not embarrassed. I'm not saying, believe me, I'm saying, help me understand what I experienced, right? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. But people are too frightened to speak about it. So when they see me quite openly talk about it, they come up to me afterwards and they tell me so many stories that they've experienced in the hut.
This might be a good time for me to interject here, because I have my own story that I'd like to share with you. And it's actually going back to what you were previously saying about Pow Hut. I was probably about 15 years old, maybe 14. I think it was the first time my father had taken me on the Holdsworth circuit. I was with my oldest friend and still my best friend. We went to kindergarten together. His name's Ben, fantastic guy, and with his mum and one of her colleagues. And so there was 5 of us. Staying the night in Pow Hut 3, I reckon it probably would have been.
They're probably the one built in 2000.
Yeah, it's probably pretty fresh. Yeah. And now, I can only speak to this so much because I didn't actually experience it myself, but the people who I was with, everyone else that I was with, all heard at about 6:30 a.m. the hut door open. And it's opened, and they've heard the clumping of boots come in, stomp, 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 stomp. They've heard the billy get put on, the water go, the primus get lit. They've heard someone stirring like a hot chocolate. Just they thought it was the ranger, and because the ranger's got his own quarters in there. And when we got up at 7 o'clock, absolutely nothing.
Yeah, a lot other people experienced that. But now the first Powell hut there, named after Ian Powell, there was a ranger in there. Now he got up to the hut at night, and he said, "I'll make a cup of tea." So he went out to the tank, which was outside, filled up his billy, turned the tap off, went into the hut, and he heard the tap running. And he said, "I'm sure I turned that off." Anyway, I went out, turned it off again. And he went back in, and a short while later, the tap was running again. So he said, "I'm sure I turned that off." This is him relating it. So he went back in, turned it off, went back in. And then it happened a third time. And he said, "Someone's having a game with me." So he turned it off and went back and stood in the doorway, hand on the doorknob with a torch, waiting. The tap came on, and it went, just like you can today, around the hut. No one there. It frightened the life out of him. So he turned it off. And then he went, and then he heard it running. And he said, "I let it run." He said it was frightening so much that he made sure, like you do, and he turned it off. And so there's a 1,001 stories. And they talk about Cedric the ghost, Cedric Wilson. He I think in 1941 he died up there. Yeah. But it's very real. I've experienced it. And other people. Some people, now at Kime Hut, when I was telling the story about the ghost there, one fella came up to me, but I never got to actually question him too much because someone else distracted me. And then he left. He said, "I'm never, ever going into that hut again." He said, "I had an awful experience in there. But I never got to," I think that was the Lower Hut Tramping Club.
Look, thank you so much for joining, Mike. I actually hope to have you on again. I think you've got some fascinating Tararua discussions here. You're just a fascinating chat.
Pleasure talking to you, Jerry.
Thank you so much again for your time. But before we go, you were going to recite a poem that you just sort of mentioned that you sort of recite to the tramping clubs when you go. Would you like to do that?
Yeah. This one's called Darkness. It's being in the hut at night, and you look out the window and see all the stars. It's magical. So I'll start now. This is called Darkness. When the ribbon of darkness falls, and candles breathe their fire, when shadows dance on walls, and the weary all retire, when distant river sings, and moths appear in droves, when rain on hut roof rings, and possums solo roves, when wind whispers low, and moorpork hunts its prey, when fire embers glow, and track grey winds its way, then this is the time I long for, when foresters come to rest. Like countless times before, the night time is the best. And that was written at Powell, that one, in April 1993.
Fantastic.
I want this one read at my funeral. I'll do this one first. Sanctuary. Glad to be back in the bush, back in the ocean of green, away from the shove and the push, and the city life so mean. Among the trees so tall and lush, free from worry and stress, to leave behind the clamour and fuss, just tranquil thoughts possess. To feel the calling breeze in summer when winter's gone, to hear at night it rustle the leaves as it plays its mournful song. The changing sky to watch a while and see its moods unfold like a heavily painted tile with colours bright and bold. The valleys and ridges beckon, their flora and fauna abounds, extending an open welcome to soothe away the frowns. So to the hills with me ascend, leave the world and sorrow. Nature, the healer, your soul will mend. Come take my hand and follow. That's Sanctuary.
Sorry, Mike.
Aha!
Aha.
Was that last one still recording, do you think?
I think it did.
It's the ghost of the Tararuas. Ooh.
Okay, thank you again to Mike Devon for some really interesting stories about ghosts of the Tararua Ranges. Look, and I totally understand that everyone might not subscribe to these sort of stories or believe in ghosts and whatnot, but everyone has different experiences, eh, Baz?
Yeah, I think it adds to the mystique of the Tararua Ranges. You know, everyone has a different experience, even on the same weekend within the Ranges. And, you know, I think the Cedric the ghost story is an example of that, where, you know, it's a myth and everyone has kind of a different interpretation of it, but it's what makes the Tararuas
even
super
more fun.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And just to add to a little bit more mystique, Mike and I had some real bad connectivity. I was dropping out heaps, and so it made for a real interesting interview. So, you know, people might pick that up during that interview. Maybe not. Anyway, let's take a break, Baz. We'll go get a cup of tea, etc. And after the break, we've got David Barnes from the Public Access Commission, which also has nothing to do with Ghosts of the Tararua Ranges. So please stay tuned. It's a very interesting chat, that one, and we'll catch you later.
See you soon.
Oh, we've been walking miles and now we'll take a break. And Jerry's got his boots up, so we'll sit a while. Don't you go away.
Okay, welcome back as always. And joining me for today for Walk and Talk is David Barnes from Herenga Nuku, the Outdoor Access Commission. Dave, tēnā koe, and thanks so much for coming on the show today. How are things?
It's good to be here, Jerry. Yeah, no, things are going well.
Thanks for joining. We were mentioning just offline before that you're in the Tararua Ranges in the weekend. How was that?
Oh, you know, it was just an average sort of a trip. It was avoiding the bad weather, so the forecast was pretty rubbish, so chose a Valleys trip and went into Mitre Flats hut and potted around there. So, yeah, it was nice.
It was a few weeks ago that my friends and I went to Waitawaiwai, also a weekend with terrible weather, and we kept it to, you know, the valleys as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, for today's show, we're here to talk about the Outdoor Access Commission. I was wondering, may we start with you providing us a little bit more insight about who and what the Outdoor Access Commission is, what you advocate for, and maybe what your role is there.
Okay, well, the Commission's a Crown agency, one of the smallest government agencies that there is. We were set up by legislation in 2008 after quite a long period of consultation involving a couple of panels that consulted around the community, set up by the then Minister of Rural Communities, Jim Sutton, who thought there was an issue about access and perhaps conflict between landowners and recreationalists, and sought to see a way forward. So here we are. We've 17 years down the track, and we've got a little agency that's ticking along.
Very good. And I think the more that I've dug into places like the Tararua Ranges, the more I've realised that it is actually a matter to contend with, whether you agree with public access or limited public access or on the side of the private landowners and stuff like that. It is a thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The Tararua Ranges are mostly part of public conservation land, so there is an inherent right of access on just about all public conservation land, but sometimes the question is about getting to it.
Yeah. And I think you and I were talking a week or two ago offline, and you said that once you're in the public conservation land, you can actually go wherever you want. You don't have to stick to any sort of track. You can go and off-piste wherever, but it's actually just before you get in there that you we have to abide by the rules. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Very interesting. In doing a bit of research for this interview, I went onto the Outdoor Access Commission website, and it's really, really informative. There's a really good website there with lots of different pages about different types of access, legal roads, paper roads.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, the website's full of pointers and hopefully useful information. You talk about legal roads, so sometimes called paper roads, unformed legal roads we like to call them, because that emphasises the fact that they have the same legal status as Lambton Quay or George Street or Queen Street. They exist as public access, but the ones that are called paper roads are sometimes called that because some people say, well, they only exist on paper, they're only lines on a map, but they still exist. They're an important part of our work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You don't always, I guess you don't always see them when you're out there in it.
Exactly. And sometimes it's not that easy to work out where they are. And in the old days, that probably required a surveyor to be certain. But, of course, with digital mapping these days, that's got a lot easier. And we have tools for that. One of our probably most important functions is our mapping service. So the maps which are available, just tap onto our website, but also WAMS, if you Google WAMS maps, you find our maps, and so with that you get the full suite of topographic maps that we're all used to, plus the option of switching on to aerial photos and a couple of other base maps, but they're overlaid with details of various forms of public access. So it'll tell you where the public conservation land is, or the council-owned reserve, or the legal public road, or various other mechanisms such as esplanade strips, which are created under the Resource Management Act, and marginal strips, which are created under the Conservation Act, and they're both along the margins of rivers along the coast, and there's a suite of others. So they're all shown on the maps, and because, of course, some of us like to get out and about into places where there's not necessarily internet access, we've got a wonderful little app called Pocket Maps, also available off our website or off the usual places you buy your apps from, or these are free, and it gives all that same stuff offline.
When I had a look on the website, it just looked like, well, I mean, I've got Topo GPS maps that I can use whenever I'm out in the Tararua Ranges or anywhere else, and it kind of just looked exactly the same as that, but just like you said, it's got those almost like the GIS overlays of the different types of land that you're on any given occasion.
Exactly.
I think it did distinguish between different types of private land as well, I think, but I can't.
Yeah, not sure. No, I don't think it does, but it does. Essentially, land is either private or public.
Yeah, okay.
But it will tell you the different types of public. Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. Other things that I was noting on the website is about responsible behaviour. I guess that's not always just trampers. That could be anywhere. You could be on a coastline or accessing certain types of beaches or anything like that. Or you could be a hunter going into the bush. You could have a four-wheel drive. You could have a dog. And there was lots of different tabs that sort of, provided information around that. So, is that quite a significant factor in taking into account when you are going off adventuring?
I think it is, and if you're on or adjacent to private land, especially stuff that's farmed or just where people are living, things like dogs and guns can be a concern to people. So most of the stuff should be common sense, but the old saying is common sense isn't as common as it should be.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The queries come out in terms of, can I get from here to here? Is there access to the park boundary from this area? And in some cases, there'll be a legal road. In some cases, there'll be private land that you're going to require permission. In some cases, and some of the notable entrances to the park have long-standing agreements for generous landowners who are allowing swathes of trampers and hunters to wander across a kilometre or two of their paddocks to get to the public land so that we can go and play.
The one that's probably most noteworthy to me is Mount Reeves. I was with my partner. We actually met each other in Tutuai Hut. So we thought we'd go for a midwinter tramp. We went up to Alpha for a night, and then we came back down and stayed in Tutuai Hut. And it was a really nice night. We were just by ourselves, just sort of collecting a bit of firewood. It was kind of a bit of an anniversary for us to go back there again to the place we met. And then 2 students came out of nowhere and told us that about 14 to 17 others were on the way. So that sort of took the romance out of that night a little bit. But the next day, we went up to the top of Mount Reeves, and I hadn't really done too much research about going down the other side, but I kind of assumed, and this is probably wrong for me to assume, that as we're walking down a very well-marked dog track, I thought, how can this not be legit? And the more we got down the other side of Mount Reeves, the more I could see it was sort of turning into a bit more pine forest. You're sort of starting to come across a bit more sort of signs of civilization again. And we eventually hit a fence, an electric fence, and on the other side of that was a paddock. And so we had to navigate through said paddock and discreetly out the other side, which was quite a bit of a walk. But, in retrospect, David, I wish I'd done things a little bit differently. Now I realise that probably getting permission from the landowner, because I don't think that this is public access, was probably the better thing to do on that occasion. Can you tell me a little bit more about that access point around Mount Reeves?
When I picked up the job 3 years ago, it was one of the cases that was on top of the pile. So the story there was that the farmer had over the years allowed people to wander up that access, and it wasn't a particularly high use route into the Tararua, but it changed a bit because what was GNS Sciences, I think they're called Earth Sciences New Zealand now, identified a point near the top of Mount Reeves as the centre of the Zealandia continent, and put a plaque up there. So suddenly there's a whole lot more interest and a bit more traffic up there. And he said he had increasing problems with people parking in silly places and blocking access ways. He also said there was a problem with rubbish, which surprises me because I don't think trampers are generally fly tippers, so I think that might be a separate issue. But anyway, for whatever reason, the route that was marked, and it was a dock-marked route, and I think there was a dock sign there at the start of the track, at the bottom end of it, was on his land. And so he did what he's legally allowed to do and said, enough, I don't want anybody going there. Now, there is one of these unformed legal roads up there. And so the queries started coming in as, well, can we use the unformed legal road? The short answer is yes, you can. The long answer is, but you have to be on the legal road and nowhere else. And so then the question of, well, where the heck is the legal road? And if you look at the map, it looks like it goes up the side of the river initially and then cuts back across the paddock and goes roughly parallel to, but not in line with where the marked route was. So the doc had attempted to do some negotiations around this, and it almost got there, and then I think the property went on the market and the guy said, look, conversations finished, talked to the new owners, and then the property came back off the market. And so when I came on board, it was sort of time to try and re-initiate those discussions. And I tried, and he didn't want to, and he didn't have to. So then the question is, well, what about this unformed legal road? And somebody, I think it was somebody at Dock, said to me, I think that legal road's in the river. And someone else, another tramper, said, no, I'm sure it's not. So the upshot was a couple of us went out there with GPS gear and went and had a play around and scrambled around the bank for a bit, and then found that the legal road does go up the river. So we went up the river for a bit, and then when it comes ashore, it's into a massive super jack and horrible stuff. And then eventually pops out on the paddock and probably be reasonable going. But that close to a road end, the public authorities, Dock, and the council, because the council essentially owns the unformed legal road, weren't particularly happy about the idea of having to try and mark a route that went up the middle of a reasonably decent-sized river. Really, that one came to an end at that point. But if the property sells at some stage in the future, we might be able to reopen discussions. And in the meantime, Dock have agreed that they are going to reopen or re-identify on the ground the other route up to Mount Reeves, which goes off from the Waihini Gorge end. Turns off the route to Cone Hut, 2 or 3 minutes from the bridge. In fact, there's a sign there that says, don't go on this track, it's not maintained and it might be dangerous. And it's actually quite usable, quite followable. And there's a guy's been tidying it up. When I was up there last, it was in quite good order. Yeah, I do not. But hopefully that'll be signposted at some stage in the not too distant.
Oh, great. And it's, going up to, if you take that route to Cone Hut, it's pretty steep. So I imagine that some people will be quite grateful for an alternative route that sort of takes you to the Taraniko River.
Well, it makes a nice little round trip too. I went up there over Mount Reeves down to Tutua and came out by Cone. One of the things that's a wee bit sad about losing the Woodside access, the Waihini Valley access, is it was probably the closest access into the Tararua from a public transport point, because it was about 4K from the Woodside train station. And, I mean, that's a bit of a walk, but it's most of us don't like road bashing, but it's not impossible. And in fact, the other possibility was even to take your bike and chain it up
Oh,
there.
true, yeah. I mean, look, we're trampers, a lot of us, so like, a bit of road walking is quite easy compared to what you'd tackle in the bush.
Yeah, but it's not fun though, is it?
It's not as good, no. In terms of someone like the example of Mount Reeves and that private landowner, is there particular liability that landowner might have in terms of if, someone comes out onto... No liability?
No. Unless they're doing something obviously dangerous. So if they're felling trees, no different from someone felling trees, in your urban area, you've got a responsibility or something like that. But general farming activities, no. The previous iteration of the Health and Safety Act, the Health and Safety and Employment Act 93 or 2, I think it was explicitly clear that a landowner only had a duty to warn. The current iteration isn't as clear, but it talks about farms not being a place of work unless actual work is being done. So a few animals in a paddock doesn't constitute work, but if you are, say, chopping a tree down, then it might do. So that was more ambiguous, but there's been some court cases, and the notable one was the one around the Whakaari White Island case, where WorkSafe sought to prosecute, amongst others, the landowners, and they were clipping the ticket on, they were charging the tour operators so much per person, and that went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal came down quite strongly on the fact that because they weren't running the activity, had no liability for people. And that's commercial users, so it makes it even clearer that the non-commercial users there's no liability for. So unfortunately, we still hear it a bit, that landowners will cite health and safety reasons for not wanting people on their land. We've got a fact sheet that's downloadable from our website. And I actually suggest to people, save a copy of that on your phone. And if you're having a conversation, say, well, look, here's the advice. And not only is it from Herenga, the government agency responsible for giving advice on public access, it's got on it the logos of, amongst others, Federated Farmers and Fish and Game and Federated Mountain Clubs. So, those organisations were all consulted, and you'd say, well, look, here's Fed Farmers' mark on this. But when all's said and done, though, a landowner doesn't actually have to give you a reason to not let you on his land. So, some of the ones that are saying health and safety have genuine concerns. Some of them are just being overcautious, some of them will be poorly advised, and some of them I suspect are using it just as a smokescreen when all they really want to do is say that they don't want you there anyway. And really, they don't have to give you a reason. They could just say no. If it's private land, they can say no.
Having said that, is there something to be said about people like myself who want to go tramping and possibly access private land at some stage, getting in touch with a private landowner, being respectful and saying, hey, look, this is what I'm planning to do. I'm doing it in XYZ amount of time ahead of time of, my trip, and giving them reasonable consideration to say yes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. They don't have to say yes, but they don't have to say no either. So, and yeah, if you don't ask, you don't get. By all means, people should do that. And there's there's an argument where there is unformed legal road crossing, say a paddock, that although you technically don't need permission to be on the unformed legal road, given it's going through the guy's paddock, it's not unreasonable to actually give them a heads up and say, hey, that goes through your paddock. He might say, look, we've got lambing going on there that week. Can you go a different week, or can you go round through the other paddock where there aren't any lambs or something like that? As I say, and while you can say legally I'm going up that unformed legal road, I'm allowed to do it, you've got to get on with people. You've got to be reasonable.
That's really where I was sort of thinking, David, in terms of just, asking nicely, respectfully, giving all the information that you can about your intentions, and just saying that you're happy to respect the land that you're on, knowing that it's their private property. I was just, my mind went to the Tararua Facebook forum, which I do keep an eye on. And there was one post a while back of someone, and I think it was at the Wainawa Road End just out of Masterton. And I think they were wanting to hit the Pines. And if you go from that road end, you go across private property, you literally go through the paddock. You're probably quite familiar with it from the weekend you've just had. I've been through there before when there's plenty of cows around me and stuff like that, and it's all pretty fine. There's the landowner's happy to provide that access, but there is a portion of that. If you want to go up to the Pines, from this post that I saw, you have to ask permission. And they were sort of saying, someone had commented saying that the owner's pretty reasonable, pretty happy to provide permission. You just need to get in touch with them. And someone had the contact details for that particular person that had the property there. So that, that's quite a good one.
Was that about the route over from there over to Holdsworth?
I think so. I mean, yeah, just looking at the map now, if you go up to the top of that Pines Peak, which doesn't quite have a proper elevation there, you come back down the other side and it says Winsenberg Hill, and you'll drop into the Holdsworth campsite roughly there, I think. I've never done that myself, but...
Yeah, no, I haven't either, but even when I first moved to the Wellington area and was looking at what to do in the Tararua, and you think, you go in there and come out there, and it's a long haul by car to go all the way back to Masterton and then back into the other road end, and you think, you just sneak across there, and you think, I wonder. But yeah, it is private land, and
that's right.
Want to do that, you got to ask.
In terms of other access points, I mean, I think that Wainawa Road End is a really good one where you are going over private property, but the person there is allowed access. And I think I mentioned Podes Road End again, where it's not too long.
Yeah, well, that's a similar one. It's a long-standing access where there's dock signage and dock marker posts, and it's just an accepted entry point. But we've got to be respectful of those, because it is private land, and the landowner could just chop it off like the Mount Reeves guy did. So really important to be on your best behaviour when you're shooting through those routes.
For risk of stating the obvious, and I don't mean to ask silly questions here, but how can we do that? How can we best respect private property?
Park where it says park here. In the Wainawa one, there's a big sign up just as you go in. It says don't bring your vehicle past here or you'll get towed. It's a dock sign. Don't disturb stock. Don't leave a mess around. Leave gates as you find them. Yeah. Just the normal standard common sense stuff that we should all know if we're out playing in the outdoors.
Yeah. I think a big one for me is, and this is just my personal experience, is that you are often around live stock. There'll be a cow just chewing away, looking at you as you go past. That I find unnerving sometimes, because I don't necessarily know what that animal's thinking, that big burly beast. And I try to go pretty quick sometimes through there. I was walking through the northern point of the Tararua Ranges, and there was a big beast there that had this look in its eye that it didn't really enjoy our company. And so it's not only just about being respectful, it's about moving quickly if you're not confident about a big cattle in your way, basically.
Yeah, and I suppose we look at them and think, that one looks mean, but I wonder if we're just anthropomorphizing in that situation, and that way he might actually be really happy or completely ambivalent about your presence, but to us he looks big and mean. Yeah, I mean,
I could have definitely been doing exactly that. Because the other thing I assume is that a farmer probably wouldn't really want to put livestock that could be aggressive anything in the same area as people coming through, and that's kind of what made me ask about the liability question earlier.
Look, there are cases and places where people don't want to allow access, and unfortunately, and I've never personally had to deal with one, but I've heard of cases where there's a strong suggestion that someone's put a herd of bulls on an area where people are going to go past, essentially to deter them from doing so or make them, which is really unfortunate.
I wouldn't really want to assume that of too many people. Yeah.
No, no, extremely rare.
Well, thank you for all your knowledge today, David. It's been a really good catch up. Thank you for coming and telling us how we can be more responsible as trampers or hunters, or however we like to access the Tararua Ranges. It's a fantastic playground to have. So having one of those fundamentals nailed down is such a massive part of it that we probably don't even think about it that often. But really great to address some of those matters today. So thanks very much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome.
Was that your phone?
It's my phone. It's a key of my ringtone.
Okay, thanks again to David Barnes from the Outdoor Access Commission. I do encourage you guys, listeners, to go and check out their website. It's really great on information about accessing the natural environment in general, whether it be beaches or, like the Tararua Ranges. Private access is a big one. It's got all the caveats around firearms, horses, biking, four-wheel driving. And then there's also the Maps app that you can download. So I'll put some of the links in the show notes for listeners as well. So Baz,
Yeah.
last but not least, we've got our giveaway quiz question. Now, the prize for this is a $50 Earthsea Sky voucher.
Very
I
nice.
contacted my guy Mike at Earthsea Sky around the corner from my work here in Christchurch. They're really awesome in there. They're a family-run business. It's all designed in New Zealand, and it's as Kiwi as you can get, I think. So it's my pleasure to sort of promote them. They're really awesome.
Friends of the pod.
Yes. So in line with the Ghost of the Tararua Ranges, I'm about to say the description question. Intro spooky music, please, Finn. My name is Basil Blatchford, and I once roamed the main Tararua Range. I now live at roughly 1,371 metres above the mist. I was a hunter before the rangers claimed me. If my spirit were to haunt a hut, it would be one whose second version or iteration was built in my honour. So tell me, trampers, avid Fever listeners, where do I rest, and now what marks my final resting place?
Very nice.
So, yes, Fever listeners, please send your questions through to tararua.fever@gmail.com. I almost forgot our own email there. Or look, if you want to private message us on the on our Tararua Fever Facebook page, we'd be more than happy to take answers through that. And yeah, look, we look forward to receiving everybody's answers. You can also Google, if you just take the name that I just read out and Google it, it'll probably give you an answer. So again, where do I rest, and now what marks my final resting place? Well, I think that's probably us for today, Baz.
Emergency breaking news. Otaki Gorge Road is closed again. Just past Blue Bluffs. Probably been closed now for a fortnight, I'd say. The only place I've actually been able to find any information on it was I can't remember, a Tararua forum on Facebook had the updates for it, but I couldn't actually find it anywhere else. And you saw that one as well?
I did.
Yeah. So indications are mid-November repair. But we wanted to kind of talk about it, a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Baz, is it past the original slip that was getting fixed, or when I say the original slip?
Yes. Yeah. I can't remember exactly how far. It's not far, but it is definitely just past the main repair that was done recently. But the odd thing is it's not showing up on kind of Google Maps or anything like that. Like the Gorge Road looks like it's open right to the road end. Which it's not until hopefully mid-November. But yeah, we kind of wanted just to flag it here, just so if the listeners weren't aware. I'm a bit gutted. I was planning on going up there with Oscar, who's appeared on the pod, to do a little bit of trout fishing. But we can always walk it. It sounds like it'll be it's a much lesser event than the repair that's just been. So I imagine you can just walk. But for legal reasons, don't quote me on that.
Well, look, maybe I'll get in touch with KCDC and see if we can get an update. We also had a bit of advice around crossing slips at the beginning of the pod, Ben, so we can take some of that advice into account. But yeah, look, it sounds like it's a bit of a moving feast. It's a bit unexpected. We live in these shaky isles, and that is New Zealand, and these things happen, especially with a lot of rainfall. So hopefully it's not an ongoing thing there, but yeah, damn.
Yeah, a little bit of a dance, and hopefully, sending some thoughts out to the folk that live on the other side. It's probably, clearly the last thing they need after the 4 years that they've just had, or 3.5 years that they've just had. So that's rough, but sounds like it's fixable. So that's good news.
All right. Well, we'll keep listeners updated as and when we have new information.
Well, I think that's probably us for today, Baz.
Awesome, man. Well done.
Thanks so much for co-hosting with me.
Absolutely my pleasure. And I very much look forward to getting some plans in the calendar for the next wander.
Yeah.
And I hope the next few days and with Johan and settle in.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
He's a sleep terrorist. He's very charming and cute, but you'll never sleep again.
Yeah. Nothing's forever, Jezza. Hold on to that.
Thanks, mate. All right.
Cool.
Thanks to Fever listeners. We'll see you on the next one.
Ka kite.
Ka kite. Hey lads, thanks so much for being here on this Baby Shower Tramp. Has anyone seen that Doc have stolen our segment on Knob of the Week lately? Crazy, eh?
Yeah, surely that can't be a coincidence.
Jerry, what do you have planned for the next show?
Yeah, didn't you say you were interviewing that guy we met last time we were at Tararua Lodge?
I'm thinking of doing an ep on Ghosts of the Tararua Ranges, and definitely interviewing that guy.
Oh, cool. That sounds fun, Jezza.
Jerry, did you mention anything about Putawai Hut being haunted? Because that candle over there in the corner is floating slowly towards us.
Yeah, and can anyone else see that old transparent guy over there? He just left through the walls.
Jezza, maybe the content for the next pod is coming slightly early?
The foulest stench is in the air, of wet suck steaming everywhere. The phantom huts, the ridges steep, where trampers wander lost to sleep. And whoever takes this track, without a compass on their back, must face the ghosts of the Tararua night, and shuffle step to morning light.
Whoa, lads, I just got a message from Finn on my PLB. He says, Defo, don't do the Thriller parody. It's an awful idea. Too hard to make it work well. Damn.